The Last Goodbye. Detective Ryan Calloway sat on the cold metal bench of his prison cell, his fingers gripping a worn-out photograph. It was of him and Shadow, his K-9 partner, a fierce yet loyal German shepherd who had saved his life more times than he could count. The last time he saw Shadow was in the courtroom when the guilty verdict was read. He remembered the dog whining as officers led Ryan away in chains. Shadow had never understood why his partner was leaving him. Ryan had been wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit, the murder of fellow officer Mike Reynolds. The evidence was planted, and his alibi ignored. Someone wanted him silenced. For 2 years, he had endured prison life, facing threats from criminals he once put behind bars. But what hurt the most was being ripped away from Shadow. Then came the news. The warden entered his cell one evening, a solemn look in his eyes. "You're being transferred next week," he said. "Maximum security." Ryan's heart dropped. That meant no visitors, no communication, nothing. "I have one request," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let me see Shadow just once." The warden sighed. "I'll see what I can do." The reunion a week later, Ryan was led into a small outdoor courtyard within the prison. His heart pounded as he saw a familiar black and tan figure standing near the gates. Shadow, his handler, Officer Jessica Monroe, held his leash. The dog's ears perked up, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, Shadow broke free. He bolted toward Ryan, tail wagging, eyes filled with recognition. Ryan dropped to his knees as Shadow lunged at him, licking his face, whining, and circling him in excitement. "Hey, buddy. I missed you too," Ryan choked out, hugging the dog tightly. Jessica wiped her eyes. "He never stopped waiting for you, Ryan." Ryan felt a pang of sorrow. He didn't deserve this. Shadow deserved better. "I need to go soon," Jessica said, her voice hesitant. "But I have to tell you something." Ryan frowned. "What is it?" Jessica lowered her voice. "I know you didn't kill Mike, and I have proof." The truth unfolds. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "What?" She glanced around. "The night Mike was killed, I found security footage that was lost in the system. It shows someone tampering with evidence in the precinct. Someone high up." Ryan clenched his fists. "Who?" Jessica hesitated. "Captain Sullivan." Ryan's blood ran cold. Sullivan had been his mentor, his friend, and now the man had framed him. "I need to get you out of here," Jessica said, "but we have to move carefully. If Sullivan finds out I know." A sudden sound interrupted them. A guard's radio crackled. "Monroe, wrap it up." Jessica met Ryan's eyes. "Stay strong. I'll get you out." Ryan watched as she led Shadow away, the dog resisting with every step. The pain of separation stabbed at his heart. But for the first time in years, he felt something he had lost. Hope. The escape plan that night. Ryan lay awake in his cell, replaying everything in his mind. If Jessica had proof, he had a chance. But Sullivan wouldn't let him live if he knew the truth was out. Days passed. Then, one night, a whisper came through the vent in his cell. "Be ready." It was Jessica. At exactly 2 a.m., the cell doors malfunctioned. The cameras looped. Ryan slipped into the shadows, heart pounding as he made his way through the corridors. Jessica was waiting near the exit, Shadow beside her. "He wouldn't come without you," she whispered, handing him a guard's uniform. "We have to move now." Ryan put on the disguise, gripping Shadow's leash. Together, they moved through the darkness, past unconscious guards. Jessica had planned everything. Then, an alarm blared. "Go!" Jessica shouted. Ryan sprinted toward the exit, Shadow beside him. But just as they reached the final gate, a gunshot echoed. Jessica screamed. Ryan turned to see Sullivan standing at the end of the hallway, gun raised. "Going somewhere, detective?" The final confrontation. Ryan barely had time to react before Sullivan fired again. But Shadow was faster. The K-9 lunged, knocking Sullivan to the ground, his jaws clamping around the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Jessica rushed forward, grabbing the weapon. "It's over, Sullivan." Ryan bent over, catching his breath as Sullivan groaned beneath Shadow's weight. "You framed me," Ryan growled. "Why?" Sullivan spat blood. "Because you were too good. You would have found out about the deals I was making. Jessica cuffed him. Well, now everyone's going to know. Justice and freedom by morning. The truth was out. The footage, along with Sullivan's confession, cleared Ryan's name. He was a free man. Outside the courthouse, Shadow jumped into his arms, his tail wagging furiously. Ryan laughed, holding onto his partner. We're going home, boy. Jessica smiled. And this time, no one's taking him away from you. As Ryan walked into the sunlight, Shadow at his side, he realized one thing. No matter what happened, they had always been in this fight together. And together, they had won. The aftermath. Ryan took a deep breath of fresh air as he stepped outside the courthouse, the golden hues of sunrise bathing the city in warmth. It felt unreal. After 2 years of living in a cage, he was free. But the fight wasn't over. Jessica walked beside him, Shadow trotting happily between them. Reporters were swarming the area, their voices blending into a chaotic buzz. Cameras flashed as questions flew from every direction. Detective Calloway, how does it feel to be exonerated? Who else was involved in the conspiracy? Will you return to the force? Ryan ignored them, his focus on Shadow. The dog looked up at him, sensing his emotions as if reading his thoughts. Come on, Jessica said. Let's get out of here. She led him to a black SUV parked nearby. As soon as Ryan opened the door, Shadow leaped in and settled into the back seat like he belonged there. It made Ryan smile. They drove in silence for a while until Jessica finally spoke. You okay? Ryan let out a breath. I don't know. I should be happy, but I can't stop thinking about what comes next. You mean the department? Ryan nodded. Sullivan wasn't acting alone. There's more corruption in the force than anyone realizes. He was making deals, covering up crimes. I need to figure out how deep this goes. Jessica gripped the wheel. Then we do it together. Ryan looked at her, surprised. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She met his gaze. They tried to destroy your life. They nearly got away with it. If we don't expose the rest of them, someone else will end up like you. Ryan stared out the window, his jaw tightening. She was right. This wasn't over. A new target. Later that evening, Ryan sat in a quiet motel room, staring at the documents Jessica had brought him. They contained records of Sullivan's financial transactions, case files that had been altered, and a list of officers who had mysteriously resigned or disappeared. One name stood out. Deputy Commissioner Raymond Holt. Ryan's pulse quickened. Holt was the second highest-ranking officer in the city. If he was involved, this went way beyond Sullivan. Just then, Shadow growled lowly, ears perked. Ryan tensed. Someone's outside. Jessica, sitting across from him, reached for her gun. Stay here. She moved cautiously to the window, peeking through the blinds. Ryan followed, heart pounding. A black sedan was parked across the street, engine running. Get down. Ryan shouted as gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the window, shattering glass. Ryan tackled Jessica to the floor as Shadow barked furiously, his body tense with adrenaline. The shooting stopped just as quickly as it started. Tires screeched as the sedan sped off into the night. Jessica sat up, breathing heavily. They know. Ryan clenched his fists. Yeah, and now, we go after them. The hunt begins with Shadow by his side. Ryan was done running. The people who framed him had made one mistake. They let him live. And now, he was coming for them. The hunter becomes the hunted. The motel room was wrecked. Shattered glass, bullet holes in the walls, and overturned furniture. Ryan crouched beside the window, breathing heavily. Jessica checked her gun, her hands steady despite the chaos. Shadow stood alert, his eyes locked on the door. They're not done, Jessica muttered. That was a warning. Ryan wiped a streak of blood from his arm where a glass shard had grazed him. They want us to back off. But now, we know for sure. It's bigger than just Sullivan. If Holt sent those men, he's cleaning up loose ends. Jessica's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, her face darkening. It's my contact at Internal Affairs, she said. They're willing to meet, but we have to go now. They won't wait. Ryan glanced at Shadow. Then let's move. They slipped out of the motel through the back, weaving through alleyways and side streets. The city felt different now. Every shadow a potential threat, every parked car a possible ambush. They reached an underground parking garage where Jessica's contact had instructed them to meet. Ryan scanned the area as she parked, his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Then, a black SUV turned the corner, headlights off. "Get out," Ryan ordered. They barely made it out before the SUV slammed into their car, crushing the side. The doors burst open, and masked gunmen spilled out, weapons raised. Shadow snarled. Jessica fired first, taking down one attacker. Ryan grabbed a fallen gun and rolled behind a concrete pillar, returning fire. Shadow lunged at another gunman, his teeth sinking into the man's arm. A scream echoed through the garage. Ryan moved fast, dropping 2 more attackers with precise shots. The last man tried to run, but Jessica caught him, slamming him against a car. "Who sent you?" she demanded, pressing her gun to his temple. The man trembled but said nothing. Then, to Ryan's horror, he smirked, and a ticking sound filled the air. "Bomb!" Ryan shouted. They dove for cover as the attacker's vest exploded, sending shockwaves through the garage. Concrete rained down, car alarms blared, and smoke filled the air. Ryan groaned, struggling to push a slab of debris off his leg. "Jess? Shadow?" A cough. "I'm here," Jessica called, emerging from the smoke, bruised but alive. Shadow limped toward Ryan, his fur singed, but his tail still wagging. Relief flooded through Ryan as he pulled the dog into a hug. "We need to get out of here," Jessica said, coughing. "That blast was meant to wipe us out." Ryan's mind raced. Holt wasn't just covering his tracks, he was eliminating threats. And they were at the top of his list. The final move, Ryan and Jessica went underground, staying off the grid for the next 48 hours. They pieced together everything they had: Sullivan's confession, the altered case files, the financial records linking Holt to drug traffickers and organized crime. But they needed one final piece: the smoking gun. Jessica's internal affairs contact had disappeared, likely killed. But there was one place where the evidence would be undeniable: the commissioner's office. Holt had an off-the-books server hidden inside police headquarters. If they could access it, they could expose everything. But breaking into the most secure building in the city? They'd need a miracle, or a damn good distraction. The heist. Ryan adjusted the stolen SWAT uniform as he and Jessica walked up the back entrance of the precinct. Shadow followed, fitted with a tactical vest. The plan was simple. Jessica would create a diversion inside, while Ryan and Shadow slipped into Holt's office. Jessica's distraction worked like a charm. Within minutes, alarms blared as officers rushed to an alleged bomb threat on the opposite side of the building. Ryan and Shadow moved quickly. They climbed the stairwell to the top floor, avoiding security cameras. Holt's office was locked with biometric access. Ryan turned to Shadow. "You know what to do." Shadow leaped up, placing his paw on the fingerprint scanner. "Access granted." Ryan smirked. "Good boy." Inside, he found the hidden server. Plugging in a USB drive, he began downloading everything. Then, footsteps. Ryan spun, gun raised. Holt stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. "I knew you wouldn't let this go," Holt said, shaking his head. "That's the problem with good cops. They don't know when to quit." Ryan didn't hesitate. He fired first, hitting one of Holt's men. Shadow pounced on the second, dragging him down. Holt lunged at Ryan, knocking the gun from his hand. They grappled, fists flying. Holt was strong, but Ryan was fueled by 2 years of rage. He landed a brutal punch to Holt's jaw, sending the man crashing into his desk. Jessica's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Ryan, we need to go now." Ryan grabbed the USB, but Holt reached for a hidden pistol. A low growl rumbled through the room. Before Holt could react, Shadow launched at him, knocking the gun away and pinning him to the ground. Ryan knelt beside him. "You're done." Holt spat blood, laughing weakly. "You really think this ends here?" Ryan smirked. "No, but your freedom does." The sound of sirens filled the air. Justice served hours later. Holt was in handcuffs, his crimes exposed. The entire department was in chaos as dozens of officers linked to his corruption were arrested. Ryan stood outside, the cold night air hitting his face. For the first time in 2 years, he felt truly free. Jessica walked up beside him. It's over. Ryan looked down at Shadow, who wagged his tail. Not over. Just beginning. Jessica raised a brow. You thinking what I think you're thinking? Ryan smirked. Yeah. The city still needs good cops. Jessica grinned. Then I guess we're back on the job? Ryan knelt beside Shadow. What do you say, buddy? Ready to be a cop again? Shadow barked, tail wagging furiously. Ryan stood up, looking out at the city. The corruption was gone. Justice was served. And for the first time in a long time, the right man was back where he belonged.